The briefing hall was unusually still, the kind of silence that made the subtle hum of the ventilation system seem louder than normal. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting elongated shadows across the polished floor, glinting off the edges of meticulously arranged maps and instruments. Officers stood in anticipation, some adjusting their uniforms, some flipping through notes, but all aware that the room was about to witness something out of the ordinary. Lieutenant Colonel Elena Shadow Ramirez entered with the quiet confidence of someone who had faced far greater storms than a room full of skeptics. Her boots clicked softly yet purposefully on the floor, a sound that seemed to punctuate her authority without drawing attention to it. She moved with measured precision, her every step deliberate, the kind of presence that demanded attention even when she tried not to command the head of the room. Major General Thomas Hargrove leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He was a man seasoned by decades of service, accustomed to unquestioned authority and the subtle intimidation that accompanied rank. Today, however, he faced a challenge he had not anticipated. With a voice laced with what he thought was teasing condescension, he addressed her. "Elena," he began, "I hear you've been quite active overseas. Care to share your kill count?" A ripple of tension passed through the room. A few officers exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to chuckle or remain silent. Ramirez's expression, however, remained unreadable. She lifted her gaze calmly to meet the general's and responded in a tone as steady as a metronome. "I do not count. I execute the mission and ensure the team returns safely. That is my responsibility. The rest is inconsequential." A pause followed, almost electric in its intensity. Hargrove's smirk faltered as he processed her words. "You don't count?" he repeated, incredulity lining his voice. "I measure success by results, not numbers," she said evenly. "Lives saved, objectives accomplished. These are the true metrics of a soldier. Numbers alone are meaningless when they fail to reflect responsibility, precision, and judgment." The silence that followed was deafening. The room had shifted. Skepticism had been replaced by a reverent tension. Officers who had chuckled nervously now sat in quiet awe. Hargrove, ever confident in his own judgment, realized for the first time in decades that he had underestimated a subordinate, and more importantly, a woman who had mastered the art of command without reliance on ego or theatrics. Ramirez continued with her briefing, detailing the latest field operation, a covert extraction in hostile territory, where she had led a small team behind enemy lines to rescue civilians and neutralize threats without a single casualty. She outlined the planning phase, the tactical considerations, and the split-second decisions that ensured success. Maps and operational diagrams were spread across the table, each marked meticulously with potential hazards, escape routes, and points of tactical advantage. Her fingers traced lines and positions with clarity and authority, each movement demonstrating her intimate understanding of terrain, timing, and risk assessment. Questions came next, punctuated with a mixture of curiosity and incredulity. One officer asked how she had managed to infiltrate an area teeming with enemy patrols. "Observation, patience, and a deep understanding of the environment," she explained. "Rushing invites mistakes. Mistakes cost lives. Every action is deliberate, every movement calculated." Another inquired about the inherent risks of such missions. Ramirez's gaze softened, not with warmth, but acknowledgement. "Calculated risk is essential. Bravery without strategy is recklessness. Our training is designed to mitigate risk, not eliminate it entirely. Responsibility accompanies every choice, and accountability follows every outcome." By the end of the briefing, officers nodded in recognition, some hesitant, some openly impressed. Ramirez exited the room with the same calm composure with which she had entered, leaving behind an atmosphere charged with respect and introspection. The general remained seated, silently reconsidering his preconceptions, while whispers of admiration and awe trailed her down the corridors. Outside, the base had already assumed its rhythmic routine. The faint hum of vehicles, The distant clang of training exercises and the occasional barked orders formed a backdrop as Ramirez reviewed her mission plans in solitude. A photograph of her former team rested on her desk, a constant reminder of those lost, those who had moved on, and those who had relied upon her decisions for survival. She traced the edges with her fingers, contemplating the weight of leadership. Every decision mattered. Every choice carried consequences beyond metrics or recognition. That a message from a junior officer appeared on her phone. The general is still talking about your composure. Never seen him like that before. Respect earned silently. Ramirez allowed herself a faint smile, but only for a fleeting moment. The battlefield never paused, and she had to prepare for what lay ahead. Maps were spread across the table again as she meticulously traced potential routes for extraction and tactical maneuvers. Every contingency had been analyzed, every risk accounted for. Preparation was ritual, precision was habit, and confidence was born from mastery, not bravado. She understood that leadership was about results, about safeguarding lives, about executing plans with flawless efficiency. The night passed quietly. Ramirez's sleep was brief, filled with mental rehearsal, visualization of threats, and anticipation of potential obstacles. Dawn approached, the first light brushing over the horizon, painting the base in muted gold. She checked her equipment, weapons, communications, survival gear, all functioning perfectly. Her team would arrive soon, and they would rely on her judgment, her calm under pressure, and her ability to navigate chaos with precision. As the sun rose fully, Ramirez stood ready. She understood that recognition was fleeting, that metrics were often shallow, but actions, courage, and responsibility were eternal. The general's question lingered in the back of her mind, not as a provocation, but as a reminder of skepticism shattered by unshakable professionalism. She stepped forward, mission-bound, every nerve attuned, every decision honed, ready to face the unpredictable with the calm certainty that had earned her both respect and a reputation that few could challenge. The helicopter cut through the night like a blade, rotors chewing at the thin mountain air. Inside, red lights washed over silent faces. No jokes, no bravado. Every man on board knew this insertion was already compromised. Mara, Cade sat near the door, strapped in, eyes closed. Not praying, not visualizing victory, just listening. To the engine pitch, to the subtle vibration through the floor, to the breathing patterns of the men around her. Fear always announced itself if you knew how to hear it. They hit the LZ harder than planned. Skid scraped rock. The bird barely hovered long enough for boots to hit ground before lifting away, vanishing into the black. Instant silence, then gunfire. The pinned-down SEAL team had been holed up in a shallow ravine for 12 hours. Ammunition low. 2 wounded. Enemy fighters positioned higher, dug in, patient. Mara didn't rush. She never rushed. She crawled to the edge, studied angles, traced muzzle flashes in her mind. Counted, calculated, stack on me, she whispered, and one questioned it. She moved first, flowing over terrain like water finding cracks. She didn't fire until she had to. When she did, shots were clean, final. The kind that didn't echo twice. Within 9 minutes, the upper ridge was silent by the time dawn bled into the valley. The team was moving again, alive. Back at base, nobody cheered. They never do after real missions. But something had changed. The same operators who once laughed now watched her differently. Not with awe, with trust. Trust is heavier than respect. That a week later, Command announced a full-scale combatives exhibition for visiting NATO units. 250 operators again. Different flags. Same egos. And once again, Mara Cade's name sat quietly on the roster. This time, no one called her weak. Still, Hawkins was paired against her again. Officially, for demonstration purposes. Unofficially, because some people still needed to see it twice. They faced each other in the center mat. Hawkins nodded once. No green, no mockery. Rollins raised his hand. This time, Hawkins didn't charge. Neither did she. They circled slow, 2 predators acknowledging each other. When they finally engaged, it was brutal but controlled. Hawkins pressed with strength. Mara answered with timing. He adapted. She adapted faster. The final move wasn't flashy. She let him think he had her. Then she dropped him. Hard. Pinned. Helpless. Cold. The impact echoed across the hangar point. 250 operators watched in absolute silence as Hawkins tapped out. Once clearly, Mara released immediately and stepped back. Rollins exhaled. That concludes the demonstration. No one moved. Then, slowly, one operator clapped. Then another. Then the entire hangar erupted. Hawkins got to his feet, breathing hard. He looked at her, not embarrassed this time. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" she asked. "For reminding us what strength actually looks like." Later that evening, as the crowd dispersed, Rollins approached her. "You ever think about teaching?" he asked. She considered it. Thought about the faces she'd lost, the mistakes she'd made, the lessons learned the hardest way possible. "Yes," she said, "but only if they're ready to be uncomfortable." He smiled. "They are now." As she walked away, someone called out from behind, "Lieutenant." She turned in. Operator raised his voice so everyone could hear. "They used to call you weak." A pause. "What do they call you now?" Mara looked around at the men and women standing there. "Warriors. Survivors. Umans shansurat sufli. They call me honest." That night, a quiet message appeared on internal boards. No rank. No signature. Strength isn't volume. It's endurance. If you're watching this on her Brave Stories, subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Mara Cade never asked for legends. She just refused to be underestimated ever again, and no one ever called her weak after that.